Wow. Welcome to the very first Informa Virtual Licensing Week. Today is the first day, the Fashion Day, and this is the first of three. What do licensees want panels? Today, the Fashion Day, sponsored by the Brand Liaison, we've established for you an all-star panel of licensing industry veterans and newcomers to tell you exactly what do licensees want. For our manufacturers out there, I'm sure you're going to share many of the sentiments of our panel, learn some strategies and some tips. And for licensors out there, here it is, right from the horse's mouth. What do licensees really want? Served up for you on a silver platter. So brand owners, if you want to work with best-in-class companies like the panelists you're about to see today, this is what their expectations are for you. I'm going to start with some super quick intros because I'm so proud of all the speakers that we have on our panel today. And yes, the Brand Liaison represents and works closely with every one of these speakers, but that's not why they're here. Every one of the speakers you're about to hear from has built a very successful business and has and will continue to rely on licensing as a means of business expansion. So let me introduce our panelists to you. First, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Heller. I'm the founder of the Brand Liaison. I'm also a trademark and licensing attorney, and I'm so proud to be here with you today. Next, let's talk about Chris Volpe. Chris is the COO and CFO of United Legwear. For the past 13 years, Chris has led United Legwear to holding several major licenses like Puma, Skechers, Champion, Weatherproof, Minecraft, and Fortnite. And United Legwear also owns the brands Avalanche, Flow Player, and Hurley. Chris is also on the board of directors of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. And here's a fun fact about Chris. Chris started in apparel when he was in high school in the stockroom at the Gap, where he met Mickey Drexler, who was then the CEO. Years later, Chris reconnected with Mickey Drexler when he was at J. Crew, and United Legwear was the major legwear vendor with a Happy Socks collaboration. So happy to have you, Chris. Next, let me introduce Jeff Siskind. For over 20 years, Jeff has been the president of the Burnett Textile Group, which is now part of Castlewood Apparel Group. Castlewood currently licenses several major fashion and athletic brands, including Hagar, New Balance, Etonic, Asics and Avia, US Polo Association, and Coleman. And Castlewood also owns and licenses out the American Outdoorsman brand and several others. Fun fact about Jeff, he's a great athlete. He won Best Athlete of the Year in college, and you can see now why he has so many of these great sporting and outdoors brands. I'm very proud to have Cindy Levitt. Cindy is the Senior Vice President for Mad Engine, a leading licensed apparel company with major character and entertainment licenses: Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, Fortnite, Coca-Cola, WWE, and so many more. I bet you Mad Engine might even have more than 100 top licenses. Prior to Mad Engine, Cindy was SVP of Licensing and Merchandising for Hot Topic and Box Lunch. And here's a fun fact about Cindy. Cindy was actually the first employee hired by Hot Topic, starting before they had even opened their first 2 stores. And Cindy also serves as chairman of Licensing International. I'm sure everybody here knows Jeff Fisher, who's now the president at Fashion Angels, the leading arts, craft, and stationery company. Previously, Jeff was at Pyramid Accessories, Fab Starpoint, and Evie of California. Throughout his career, Jeff's done hundreds, if not thousands, of licenses with Disney and Warner Brothers and Hasbro, Nickelodeon, Universal, Mattel, Crayola, Lego. And Jeff's worked in licensing in virtually every category from fashion and accessories, back to school, toys, and arts and crafts. And here's a fun fact about Jeff Fisher. He was the very first Hello Kitty licensee in the US. So you know he's a disruptive thinker, and I can't wait to hear about what he's up to at Fashion Angels. And last but not least, our newest client, Brian Special, who along with his brother created the Comfy. You all know the Comfy, the big oversized wearable blanket that wears like a sweatshirt. You've seen it on Shark Tank, QVC, Costco, or maybe you saw somebody wearing it. It's one of Shark Tank's top 5 selling products ever. Barbara Corcoran's most successful investment in 11 seasons on the show. The Comfy's already a huge success and is now expanding through major character and sports licensing in. We're going to be licensing out the Comfy in some key categories and a few other expansion strategies you may hear Brian talk about today. And here's a fun fact about Brian. Brian's a former TV news and sports anchor who's interviewed everyone in sports from Charles Barkley to Tiger Woods, and now has transitioned to selling big comfy blankets that you wear like a sweatshirt. Wow, Brian, from sports announcer to entrepreneur to Shark Tank to here at Virtual Licensing Week.
Makes no sense.
But I'm really proud of this all-star lineup. So I want to get started. On this panel today, we have such a broad group of licensees that encompass fashion brands, activewear, outdoors, sporting goods, character, and entertainment properties. So let's start off talking about the brands that they license and the criteria that we license. I'm going to start with Jeff Siskin. Jeff, I mentioned some of your brands, Hagar, New Balance, Coleman, US Polo Association. Jeff, can you describe generally what types of properties you look for as far as brands and categories for licensing?
For, we usually don't come across the opportunities to license, brands that are top of market like Nike, Adidas, or Calvin Klein or a Polo. We're usually getting that next tier down or even the tier below that, but knowing the market so well, we usually can find the opportunities within a brand once it's presented to us and kind of figure out where they fit, where they could be positioned. Then we do things like surface the market, speak to our retailer relationships, our market relationships, get a lot of feedback. And even from that, sometimes you get some mixed feedback and you have to read the tea leaves and have a good feeling for that opportunity. I have had an experience where I did get a good bit of negative feedback for a brand, but still yet I licensed the brand. It was a well-known brand. It just didn't have the status that other people felt that we could elevate it and make it an important apparel brand. But we wound up doing the license anyway, and it's one of our biggest licensed properties today. So, sometimes you have to read the tea leaves and just go with gut instinct. We knew it was pretty much a household name out there in the marketplace. And as long as we put great product behind it, our relationships would come through. We'd be able to place it and build a business.
Excellent. And Chris Volpe, same question. I mentioned some of your brands, Puma and Champion. What are the types of properties you look for at United Leadwear, and what are your current goals for licensing?
Our portfolio at this point is pretty robust as far as the brand exposure. Our success has really been a combination of organic growth within the product categories that we segment, as well as expanding into new product categories. Puma was our first license, and Isaac got that license in 1998. We've been their longest term license and now JV partner since that time. Overall, we really look at brands that are either first in class and A-rated at this point of maturity on our portfolio, something you can't say no to. One example of that is the Champion brand that came to us, and it's been a tremendous success. But overall, we're currently, I would say, very satisfied with our exposure. We went from being a legwear company to a legwear, underwear and loungewear company to a legwear, loungewear, underwear, children's apparel company, then got into bags, hats, and accessories. And lastly, our newest entry is in men's apparel with Hurley. So, at this point, unless there's an opportunity brought to us that we just can't say no to, we're pretty happy scaling what we have and building efficiencies and streamlining our operations as well as our our education on the new product categories and the new retail environment.
Excellent. Cindy, Mad Engine has a ton of great properties, but let's ask about Hot Topic, where you were responsible for bringing programs that may not be along the lines of, say, Disney. Cindy, what was the riskiest licensing deal you ever took on, and what happened?
Probably Studio Ghibli out of Japan. Hot Topic has a real dedicated anime customer, animation customer, and the Hot Topic employees love Studio Ghibli. But we weren't sure, first of all, not everything from Japan translates, which is one of my biggest lessons in licensing. And it's not so much that the MG was big, but the cost of doing business. There's travel to Japan. There's working with Japanese approvals. There's working with, having a commitment to design many items and trying to translate what they want for the brand and what sells in the United States. And it ended up being so niche and so such a gamble, but it was great. There's just a huge following for Studio Ghibli that it ended up being a really good story, but it was risky because of the infrastructure we had to put in to carry that license.
And how was it working with the licensor that had such high expectations from the product development?
It was one of the most magical experiences of my life in licensing. It's the fairy tale story, the nicest people in the whole world. If you can see the Miyazaki documentary that's on public television right now, that gives you a flavor of it. It was wonderful, but it was a lot of work. But it was I wish everyone could go through a wonderful licensing experience like that. But it did take some structure that we did not have that we had to put in place.
Excellent. We're going to come back to some of those points a little bit later. Jeff Fisher, you've done a ton of licensing in your career. What do you look for in determining whether or not to sign a license?
Well, I would say that it's changed dramatically over the years. What were knee-jerk reactions early on, filling out a portfolio, believing that everything was the greatest thing has now changed dramatically into what I would call a very strategic approach to kind of identifying a brand or license or how content gets delivered to us. So, from my perspective, we want to stay true to our roots. Ensure that the brands and or the licenses that we're beginning to have discussions with fit within the categories that we're in. We understand what the retail landscape looks like. We don't want to be, multi-licensed, although we are in often cases, but in a way that, the often used word white space to try to figure out how we're a value add to a retailer and to a licensor. We don't look to take something on to just replace dollars. We're looking for incremental dollars for our partners as well as for ourselves. Obviously, understanding an exclusive arrangement versus non-exclusive, having that opportunity to be able to lead your destiny as opposed to be controlled by the competitive landscape of potentially another supplier as well as the retailer, puts you into a challenging position early on. And to understand that the DNA of the brands and kind of the DNA of the licenses that we go after stay true to what we represent as a company and stay true to what we understand that we do well. One of the things that we work super hard on is under-promising and over-delivering. And, we want to make sure that we do that and we do it in a very thoughtful way. So right now it's about being very strategic, being super thoughtful, and understanding what the return on that investment will be versus the time and energy that we need to put in it and where it's going to end up from a retail perspective.
Excellent. And that time and energy resonates, follows right on the heels of what Cindy was saying on the cost of development, sometimes being greater than the cost of the guarantees.
Absolutely.
And Brian, I'm sure you're learning a lot from these two. You're the new guy on the block in apparel licensing. But you spent 2 years manufacturing the company and are now looking at bringing on some of these major licenses. Well, let me ask you broadly, why licensing and why now?
Well, it's such a natural fit for our brand and this product that we have, the company, which is an oversized blanket sweatshirt. When my brother and I first got into this, my brother Michael, who co-invented the product with me just over 3 years ago now, When we first got into this, it was like, oh my gosh, not only are these things amazing and they're perfect for everyone, but what a perfect thing to wear out at a sporting event, at an NFL game. We're NFL season ticket holders, you know. You could see people in Green Bay with their Packers comfy, things like that. So that was always at the top of our mind when we started this, and then we got more into it, and it's like, well, wait, this giant hood. I mean, that's kind of Star Wars like, right? So there's just such a natural fit for a product that everyone loves and is made for everyone. And there are so many different applications for it. And we knew that 3 years into the business now, it was time to make a move into the licensing world. We're very excited about it. And Stephen, with your team leading the way, I mean, we're just pumped because we're new to this, obviously. So like you said, learning from everyone who's talking here, getting all kinds of great insight, and looking forward to you guys leading the way and getting us all these incredible licensing deals that we're so hoping for.
Perfect. And that leads us right into our first major topic is working with licensors. And we've all heard the expression that licensing is like a partnership, or licensing is like a marriage. And I guess that's never been more true than the current time in the COVID world. But it's always important for licensors and licensees to cooperate in building a successful licensing program and the obligations that run both ways. Jeff Fisher, why don't you start us off? What kind of support do you expect from a licensor?
I think the first thing I would like to say is that the word partnership is one that's used very often. And I think that in the licensor licensee community, it's one that I think more so today on everything that we're dealing with needs to be kind of addressed and identified in a much deeper and more broader perspective. The world's changed. Licensing as we've known it 20, 30 years ago, doing deals with MGs and royalty rates and having hundreds of retailers to go to market with and present your product to today is a different world. So from my perspective, I'm looking for someone who uses the word partnership and understands what that means, because once we throw our hat into the ring, we're 110% committed. We're committed from a product development perspective. We're committed financially. We're committed emotionally and spiritually. We're committed to being an extension of your brand, an extension of a licensor. And we need them to be flexible. We need them to be understanding of the times and the shifting times. We need to have them understand the financial aspects associated with the businesses. We need them to understand how retailers are opening and closing, who's successful, who's not successful. Speed to market for me is an essential aspect of the way I'm spending much of my time in this new venture, which is kind of a throwback to where I started my career in terms of reducing speed to market through our vendor base, through our manufacturers, through turns in our creative department. We require that from our licensors. We can't necessarily always wait for 2 to 3 week turnarounds and have to move minor graphics here or there. They have to trust in our ability to understand that we know our business, that we know what we're doing, that they've hired us and brought us on board as the experts. And I would say that the most important thing in terms of the relationship is to have this understanding that we're in it together, that this isn't two factions that are fighting against each other, but the fact that we're in this together and that we rely on them oftentimes to lead the marketing charge, to ensure that if there is a CMF, selfishly, I want to understand how that drives my business, not the CMF for everybody's business.
And just for the people watching, CMF is Common Marketing Fund?
And oftentimes, we'll put this money into a fund and the licensor will go out there and they'll spend it. But, the question, as any good business owner would ask, is where's it going as it relates to me? So we just want to understand that when we get into bed with a licensor partner, wherever they come from and whatever the financial attributes are to the deal, that there is an understanding that it goes both ways, that we're going to need their help, they need our help, and 1 + 1 has to equal 3 or 4.
Great. And Cindy, with all of your licenses at Mad Engine, what kind of support do you expect from your licensors?
One is assets and approvals. I think the toughest thing right now, and I'm very transparent on these kind of things, we can't sell product if we don't get approvals. And what Jeffrey just said too about we need approvals faster than ever now because everyone's been on hold. And we also need to break some rules and standards right now. There's so many standards at a lot of the licensors. And you know, I don't mean quality and all that, but like some of the rules. And it's like, if we all want to get business done right now, we have to think outside the box. We need to be fast on approvals. We need to approve things that are not usually maybe in your deal, but might get us some business. And we need assets, and we need assets on time. So, but it's just like, I cannot stress enough about this approval thing that is slowing us down all over the place still in the midst of what we're doing.
Great advice. So marketing and product approvals being the two primary areas that we expect help and support and cooperation between the licensors and licensees. Jeff Fisher, let me just go back to you. Maybe without naming names, can you give an example of a licensor who gets it, that really supports the brand and your needs?
Well, I would say that for the most part, the larger licensors, you know, the big box entertainment companies, they get it, they understand it. The deliverable beyond the getting it, I think, is where the challenge comes in. I think Cindy would attest to that. That sometimes promises are made, but you know, they're not necessarily always delivered. I think if I think back to a couple of situations where I've had some success in the past, I've been associated with a couple of good brands. One in particular would do a few things every couple of years to anniversary the success of their brand. And one thing that resonated really well with me, and this was early on, a while ago, where they took almost their entire company and motivated all of them and utilized their teams to help us set up booths, help us push marketing, help us get social media out there. We're flexible on royalty rates for a period of time, and help do things which were completely outside of the boilerplate of the contract, because the concept there was, how do we market the macro perspective of a long-term brand strategy, as opposed to how are we monetizing something really quickly and ringing the register. And it was very interesting to see in this window of opportunity how they were able to promote that, and how they were able to get everybody on board and give us the support that we needed when we didn't have the hands, or even at that time, possibly some of the financial aspects of it. And then very quickly, not to take up too much time, but most recently I had a conversation with a large brand owner in the kind of in the TV world. And in a conversation that we had, I found it super intriguing and very interesting that this individual, in the midst of a 30-minute conversation about how we were brainstorming to build a new brand, which kind of fell right in my wheelhouse of things that we were doing, offered up doing videos, supporting it from a marketing perspective, helping do social media, offered to supply us with creative and art help, because I had 3 girls on maternity leave in my creative department currently. And it was almost like it was served up on a silver platter. And I haven't had that kind of a response from a licensor, a large company, in a very long time. So it started to show a little bit more of what we hope is kind of the flexibility of what needs to happen in our industry right now. It's very, very exciting to hear that, and very jazzed up about it. And I'm excited to take that forward.
That's just such a great story, where the licensor really goes above and beyond and to help with the design. Let me pick somebody. Jeff Siskind. How about the opposite? And without naming names, can you give us a story of where a licensor just didn't get in, completely dropped the ball?
I can't name names.
I don't want to embarrass anybody.
I'm so tempted, as is everybody on the panel when it comes to answering this question. Hey, great feedback from Jeff and Cindy there, by the way. But yes, I've had that experience early in my career where a licensor had promised to have dedicated promotion, advertising, had people in place to give us our approvals on a timely basis, and help us actually even coordinate with other licensees for retailer meetings so we could all collaborate. And I would say it was a veiled attempt on their part at first to even try to get it done. And then it just seemed like they just threw their hands up. And I guess they thought, you know what, nobody baked it into their deal for us to have to do. We do it. We have our contracts. We'll collect our money and see what happens. So they never made the investment on their part. We had our royalty plus our advertising fund that we were on the hook for. And, we lived up to the agreement. And when the time came for us to exit, we very nicely exited. I'm still friends with them, but
and where is
probably
the brand,
won't do a deal.
where is the brand today, Jeff?
Nowhere. It's nowhere.
Exactly the point.
It's funny. It literally went south in the country and then went south. Yes, it went away.
And that's the lesson for the licensors out there too. Let's turn to another important area I want to cover today, the licensing deal terms. And licensing agreements have generally been the same over the past few decades. Sometimes the royalty rates change. Sometimes GMRs and GMS, guaranteed minimum royalties, guaranteed minimum sales, vary, but the structures remain very consistent. Let's start with Cindy. Cindy, what kind of changes are you seeing in licensing deal terms today and in the modern day, but in the post-COVID world?
In post-COVID, I'm not seeing royalty rates change. I feel like they're still creeping up, and I think we have to watch that. I feel like, a lot of them are going towards a premium film drop royalty rate, and there's no need for it. But I feel like there is somewhat of an open mind on creative MGs. And one thing we've been trying to do is to do trigger deals, which we put a little MG in order to, let them know we have skin in the game. And, so we do something, but it doesn't trigger till we get it into a mid-tier or mass account, because we just can't, in this day and age, we can't depend on which retailer is going to be around a year from now or 2 years from now. And we certainly can't commit to that we're going to get one of 8 or 10 slots in one of those big retailers. So we're trying to do wherever we can a trigger deal that works for all of us and doesn't put the licensee at risk, because COVID has shown us the licensee is at a lot of risk with films moved and return or orders canceled and sitting on inventory. The licensee is just pressured from all sides. So we need to be more creative on future MGs.
And maybe, Chris, you guys have several licenses. Are you seeing deal terms being flexible now and minimum guarantees or royalty rates changing?
The licensor partners that we partner with in our current core portfolio, we've had like deep-rooted, deep-seated relationships working-wise, and we do a lot of due diligence on the management and the culture of the companies and brands that we license with. So we spend a lot of time with them. We go out and usually visit with them. Obviously, we do our due diligence in the market, but we make sure that any licensor that we're signing with is aligned with us. We see ourselves, for all of our partners, our licensor partners, as an expansion of their balance sheet, both from a financial standpoint, a brand exposure standpoint, a distribution, and a product supply chain standpoint. So we really focus on the top-to-top level relationships with the principals or the C-level executives that run these companies, and we make sure that our corporate DNA and our targeted business model aligns with theirs. And we really, even through COVID, have had great success. The interesting part of our business, speaking to that, is the product categories that we sell are more basic driven and aren't really as seasonal as other areas. And so with that, we've been able to keep our distribution moving, keep 100% employment base, and work with our licensing partners, both on cash flow terms, on guaranteed minimum royalties, deferring payments, obviously keeping to all of our obligations, but terming things out. And with that, between that and the government support, we've kept 100% employment base throughout the COVID. Yeah, it's been, we're very proud of that. It's a very important part of Isaac's culture and the company.
Yeah, really admirable what you do, and a testament to you and to Isaac at United Legwear. But on that topic, and talking about flexibility and clauses, and let's talk quickly about the definition of net sales. And For those of you who've seen, I recently did an interview with Licensing International about a trend I'm seeing to allow uncollectible accounts to be a reduction for net sales in the royalty calculation. And I'm on the licensor side as much as I am the licensee side, but it seemed to me very unfair for a licensee who shipped the goods and now the retailer goes out of business or doesn't pay, so the licensee, manufacturer, they're out the cost of goods, they're not going to make a profit, and the definition of net sales previously still required them to pay the royalty. Especially with the number of bankruptcies and uncertainty in this environment. I'll start with Chris, but if anybody else wants to chime in, are you seeing any flexibility in uncollectible accounts being a reduction to net sales?
I mean, our core business is really focused in the club business, primarily being our largest volume business, the off-price business. Obviously, we support the department store business, but our exposure to bad credit has been, luckily, and I spend a lot of time on this as our CFO and with my team, we've managed our bad debt and our liability on the credit side very well. When JCPenney went out, we were fully covered. We have aided our Macy's exposure right now. I was saying our longest term licensor is Puma, and Puma does have a brand target to get into certain channels of retail that they consider what they term as game changer accounts. And Puma works with us very aggressively that if we ship into these accounts, what the brand presentation and their standard credit accounts, if we do not get paid or have to deal with the credit exposure, they do relieve us of our royalty. So that's really a sign of what I had said earlier with the partnership and the collaboration and really having a culture that ties together. And if we're going to build the brand, then let's take the risk together, let's manage the risk together, and let's do it stacking hands so it optimizes the brand in the long term and doesn't mitigate our ability to run the business profitably while supporting the brand building. Excellent.
And let me ask this question maybe to Jeff Fisher, because you're working in the toyetic area, and we saw what happened to Mattel and Hasbro with the TRU bankruptcy. Jeff, are you seeing licensors being flexible on the definition of net sales?
Yeah, so for me, net sales is the holy grail of a contract. You know, it's like where I go when I get a contract. It's the first page I go to. And I think I do that because, obviously now during the pandemic that we're dealing with, things are going to be a little bit different. But the reality is that, the definition of net sales for many years has been the biggest challenge between licensee and licensor. And I know the way I described it is one of the largest licensors, entertainment companies that we do business with in the world, that their definition of net sales is gross sales. And the problem with that is that if you're doing business with some of the accounts that we all do business with, mid-tier retailers, department stores, the dilutions that you have to factor into your cost of goods can oftentimes be where you ship $1 and you collect 85 cents and you're paying on the dollar. So even without the aforementioned, potential closures, bankruptcies, unforeseen issues that are going to come with retail, the addressing of net sales is probably more important now than it's ever been before. I would say, in regards to what Cindy said, the way I'm approaching it is tying it into, GMRs and MGs as kind of one perspective way to approach how do we negotiate the terms of a deal. And the fact is that if anyone's doing a deal from a licensor perspective today, for my advance to sit in their bank account and to do a deal based on a guarantee, then we probably shouldn't be doing business together, and it's all about royalty revenue. So there's definitely a bigger picture here. I have actually, after reading your article, listening to it, you and I spoke a little bit about it. I had started to broach the subject with a few licensor friends of mine, many of which who are open to the conversation, some of which I've expanded that conversation. Some are open and some go back to the scenario of like, listen, who's the banker here? And I get both sides, right? In other words, if I decide to sell Toys R Us Canada, which we do a big business with, and we do with a number of people who are no Long Justice and many other accounts, and their credit rating has changed, then I have to be cautious of where I enter into from a business perspective, and I have to have a fiduciary responsibility to my company to ensure that I'm protecting ourselves. So, I see both sides of the coin. If I'm going to enter into it, that's fine. One thing that I will say I found very interesting is in a most recent conversation regarding this, I threw out the opportunity to at least have a conversation with a licensor partner on if we were going to enter into a potential order with a potential retailer who we were concerned about. And if in fact we had felt that there could be some risk, would we feel the pressure from the licensor to have to sell that retailer and say, go out and do the business because everyone else is selling them? The response I got back is, we will back you, which I felt very comfortable about and gave me a little bit more of a level of partnership from them, saying, okay, at least they're not going to hound me for something if we both mutually agree that there's a risk here. But we'll have to manage it, I think, on a case-by-case basis. But net sales has to be addressed without a doubt.
Yeah, I definitely see that as a big trending topic going forward. And as we wind down to the last 10 minutes or so, I just wanted to turn our attention to the retail channels of distribution. And Chris mentioned the clubs and the off-price, and Jeff Siskin mentioned, where they're selling. And long before COVID, we witnessed a steady shrinking of the number of brick and mortar customers, whether it was the independents losing ground to big box. Within the big box world, mergers and acquisitions, when Federated bought a series of regional department stores and rebranded them all Macy's, or even several of the big box just reducing the number of doors like we see with Penny's and Sears. And then, of course, the complete bankruptcies, Sports Authority, Bon-Ton, TRU. Let's start with Jeff Siskin. Jeff, how has the shrinking number of retailer accounts changed the way you do business?
The retail partners that we have, they seem to want to do more business with less people. Seems like they want to kind of have their little pack of people that they're kind of pushing along, and in this day and age, helping us be successful, and we're going to be their vendors for the future. That's the way I feel to an extent with a good amount of our retail partners. So we're focusing more on the relationships. I'm having a lot more top level conversations to make sure those relationships are ironclad. And we're also really digging in further on the e-com part of the business, which is probably for us, if I'm being honest, is the lagging part of our business. It's behind where it should be at this point in time. But now we got time to focus on it. We have the resources and the wherewithal to focus on it, so we're doing that.
And we're going to get into e-commerce in a minute. In fact, maybe this is a perfect segue for Brian. You've been now almost 3 years working with major retailers. Tell us about how the retailer environment is affecting your business and what you're looking at between e-commerce versus brick and mortar and vice versa.
Yeah, just echoing what everyone else is saying. I mean, the retail environment is getting scarier and scarier. I mean, to the point where there are some of the big boys out there that we can't get insurance on for their orders. And so that begs the question, do we take the order and take the risk, or do we, respectfully decline? And you're talking about millions of dollars worth of business that you're potentially turning down. So it gets scarier and scarier, but it also does kind of jolt you into action and be like, it is time to focus more on e-com, more on Amazon. Our website, in March and April, we started really focusing on it more with the pandemic, and our sales are up in some cases 15 times over what they were last year. So we know it works if we put the effort and the resources into it. But yeah, the retail environment, latch on and hold on to the big boys that are solid, and that the creditors know are solid, and bulk up that e-com and Amazon business. That's definitely our strategy.
Brian, I don't want to catch you off guard, but can you describe generally the mix of your company between wholesale to retailers versus your own website versus, let's say, like Amazon?
I'd say we're about 70% retail right now and 30% combined between Amazon and e-com. And we're definitely looking to more, I don't know, get that more into the 50-50 range sometime this year, hopefully.
And is that through building through Amazon or your website or a combination?
It's both. The biggest opportunity, obviously, is through your own website. That's where your margins are the greatest. That's where your customer acquisition costs are the highest. So it's a challenge, but that's definitely our goal. And like I said, we found out that we are basically pandemic proof, and our business has thrived throughout these uncertain last few months. And so that just makes us more excited when we can get out of the 110-degree weather that we have here in Arizona right now and get more back into comfy season. We'll be ready to go.
Well, definitely people going to thecomfy.com, just like they're going to Jeff Fisher, fashionangels.com, and crafting being a big hobby during this pandemic. Jeff, what's your mix? Jeff Fisher, what's your mix between brick and mortar versus your website versus Amazon, and how do you manage that?
I'd say that obviously we got very fortunate that one of our 5 divisions, being arts and crafts and stationery and things of that nature that are keeping kids and families busy, was highly successful. The sell-throughs have been great even prior to COVID, but the mix had been typically about 85 to 90% brick and mortar to about 10% e-com. And today, if we were to run those numbers, we have increased our Amazon business threefold to date over last year in totality. The orders that we're receiving on a weekly basis make no rhyme or reason behind the projections. We're playing catch up. We've spent a ton of money internally, quite a bit of funds to reestablish our B2B as well as a B2C site. And what we're doing is, because we're probably one of the few people that still sell probably a couple of thousand independent mom and pop stores that are still in business and paying their bills. But we're turning our B2B site into a place for them to go and buy their product, make it a little bit easier, reduce costs, potentially eliminate, sales reps and things of that nature to pass that savings on to them. But there's no doubt that we're moving our business into a much more robust e-commerce model and concentrating on, 80% of our business is done in 20% of our accounts. And with a lot of these guys going out, it's kind of allowed us the ability to shed a little bit of the business that we were hesitant to take, and we concentrate our efforts there. And I think we're kind of looking in a similar situation where Brian is. I think the way e-com is going to increase over the next number of years, I think we're looking at a 50-50 split between direct-to-consumer e-com model from an Amazon or any other marketplace models and some brick and mortar.
So it's interesting because, and I just switched it back to gallery view because I want to see a show of hands. It's interesting now. I just heard 3 people in a row say we're moving more toward e-commerce, How many people on this panel work with a licensor that runs the e-commerce site for the brand? Chris, can you tell us about your licensor and what brand and how they run the sites that you participate in for the entire brand?
Well, most of our licensors run their websites, and we're a supplier to either their retail stores and e-com sites, or they only have e-com sites, in-com sites. The examples there would be Puma, Skechers. We do a lot with Champion, with Hanes, and now with Hurley, as we're an investor with the brand, with Blue Star. We're collaborating on the Amazon site together, but they're running through Blue Star the Hurley.com, and we're a supplier to them. So generally, we sell into our licensors' .com business on a reduced markup structure and with no royalty.
And are you selling in bulk, or are you handling the pick and pack and fulfillment?
Currently, we're selling in bulk, but we do have the ability to do pick and pack. But currently, in those relationships, we are selling in bulk.
Excellent. And Jeff Siskin, are you having the same experience with what brand is it that is running their own e-commerce sites?
For me, it's U.S. Polo Association. They do a great job with their own e-commerce site. They have a shop on Amazon as well. And all of my other answers would echo exactly what Chris said.
And are you selling to USPA in volume without a royalty as well, or are you doing the?
Yes, without royalty, and the markup structure is dictated in the license agreement.
Excellent. I'm so excited and honored to have all of you on this panel. As we wrap up, I want to give each one of you a chance to share some of your great knowledge and energy. So I call it final words of wisdom. Let's start with Jeff Fisher, and we'll wind our way through each one of you to give some sort of strong closing remarks. Jeff?
First of all, thanks a lot for allowing me, Steve, to be part of this. This was super fun, educational, informative. Cindy and I know each other quite a bit. I don't know the other panel members very well, but Brian, Chris, and Jeff.
You do now.
Great to meet you guys. Have a lot of very similar experiences with you guys. What I would say is that I would urge a licensee, a manufacturer, somebody who's going into the business to try to be a little bit more methodical, be strategic, be really thoughtful about what you want to do. Make sure that whatever you enter into, you're very comfortable with the partner, that there's an emotional attachment between you and the partners that you're working with. Ensure that you're not stepping outside of your comfort zone. We all have a tendency to think that because we do X, we can do Y sometimes, and oftentimes that comes back and hurts you, and then it takes your eye off the ball of what you do really, really well. And I would say that just be really respectful of the relationship. And I think the key aspect here is don't be afraid to ask every question that you can ask. You're never going to know what it is until you ask, and you don't know whether or not they'll say yes unless you ask them. And that's kind of the seat that I sit in at the moment.
Excellent and great advice from someone who I respect so much. Chris, some words of wisdom from Chris Volpe?
Steve, again, thank you for having me on the panel. Thanks for inviting me. It's been tremendously educational and fun to participate in, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone on the call, and it's a pleasure to meet you all in a more close environment. I know a lot of you from your reputation and your names, and it's an honor to be with you. From a licensee perspective, speaking to potential licensors to look at, which we've talked about on the new world, the new retail environment, the position on the club business and the off-price business and the mass business, and where brands will sit in the next decade or two, where business will be done on the Amazons of the world and in the mass retailers of the world. I can tell you, in speaking to the Targets of the world where we do business, as well as the Walmarts of the world where we do business, as well as Sam's and Costco, brands are approaching them every day. The evolution of the brand distribution model is changing every day, and any licensor out there that really wants to be forward-thinking and efficient in their distribution model, as well as expanding and controlling their brand, they have to be commercial thinking in allowing a licensee to be an extension, as I said earlier, of their balance sheet and be a real partner and a collaborator in their effort to drive their brand. And really, what is the purpose of having a licensing model? It's to bring in a company that specializes in a category that's not core and using them as an extension of distribution and opportunity with your brand and your balance sheet beyond your own, and taking that, leveraging it, partnering and supporting each other for mutual benefit. So I think it's very important that all licensors keep those concepts in mind and go into things with an open mind. I think the days of caps on distribution are either gone or going away. I think that any licensor that's talking to a licensee and worrying about that is talking to the wrong licensee. And I think that we have to be allowed as licensees, with the direction of our licensors, to take their brand DNA, take their distribution DNA, and enhance it, support it, and make it relevant for our products. That's my opinion.
Really well said. And like a brilliant CFO with the balance sheet and like a brilliant businessman. So thanks. Cindy, so respect you. Your final words of wisdom?
Kind of what Chris said. And first of all, thank you guys for letting me be on this panel. I've been taking notes, learning all kinds of things I need to check on contracts now. So this is really, really good for me also. But to echo what Chris said, for any licensors, go where your customers are. And I see sometimes a lot of companies that are getting into licensing are putting licensing under marketing departments. Then marketing does not necessarily understand retail. There's still a prestige thing that we only want it in really high-end places or specialty. They're not there right now, and the orders are going to be small. It's like we all need to go where customers currently are, which is changing rapidly with the pandemic. And I just feel like there's a barrier still on what old school is of where a brand should start. So go where your customers are, open up your channels. Jeff Siskin, 14 seconds left. You got the ball in your hand. The clock is ticking down. Taking that three, what's your final words of wisdom?
Everybody on this panel should just drop the mic after they speak because you guys are really impressive. Thanks, Steve, for having me on. Yeah, coming from both the angle of we're a licensor and a licensee, super flexibility. You got to let people, like if we're going to talk sports parlance, you got to let them put up stats. You got, like Cindy said, you got to go where the business is. So give people flexibility, have open dialogue, be smart about where you go. It's a new world we live in. It's changed dramatically. What should have happened over a 10, 15-year period just happened in 3 months.
Yeah. Excellent. And let's
keep your eyes open to that.
To Brian, the true entrepreneur, Shark Tank success story. You get the final word here. What's your story about ingenuity and determination to our listeners?
Yeah, I can't add too much to the licensing piece because I feel like I've just had a masterclass in licensing from everybody on this panel, and it's been a real privilege and an honor to be included and be able to sit here and listen to it. And I say that that's kind of how I feel every time that my brother and I get off the phone with Barbara Corcoran. It's like we look at each other and we're like, wow, that was just another masterclass in business, things we've never even thought about. That she has just all this incredible experience. And what it comes down to? It comes down to relationships in all aspects of business. And it comes down to, on top of that, it comes down to the golden rule. And that sounds really simplistic, but you know what the mission statement for our company is? It's we make people happy. That's it. And we let that filter down through everything that we do, our relationships with our vendors, our relationship with our customers, especially our relationships with each other. And I think if we all just kind of step back and got away from the greed and the competitiveness of it. We're all pretty lucky to be on this earth at this time with each other at this period of history, as crazy as it is. And I think there's just lessons to be remembered, just simple principles and truths to remember. And, if we all just kind of take care of each other and do the right thing and treat other people the way we want to be treated, business is better too. And so is life.
Really heartwarming story. And talking about relationships, I want to just give my personal thanks to each of you, Jeff, Cindy, Jeff, Chris, and Brian. I love the fact that we all work together and we do business together, but more important, really proud to call each of you a friend. For those listening at home, if you have any questions for any panelists, pop into our virtual booth, the Brand Liaison. Click on Contact Us or email me. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions or put you in touch with our panelists. And once again, Informer, you guys outdid yourselves. Thanks to Informer for putting together this virtual licensing week. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you on this virtual show floor. Thanks, everybody.
You guys.